Welcome back. In this session, we're diving into some of the most common and often confusing questions we hear about investment products. From TFSAs to RAs, unit trusts, and living annuities, understanding how they work can help you make more informed investment decisions and have better conversations with your financial advisor. I'm pleased to welcome Marc Lindley, our resident product expert at 91, to help unpack the what, the how, and the why behind the most talked about investment vehicles. Marc, let's get into it. I think the first thing is around the purpose of investing. And particularly for today, a lot of the time, the purpose of these vehicles is actually to provide us a security for when we're not earning. So that's the purpose of what we're going to talk about. If we switch over to the what, now we've had lots of panels where we talk about have a short-term emergency fund, have some short-term conservative investments, and there you can use things like cash. If you're a little bit more risky, you need a bit more risk assets. You can use things like equities and offshore investments. But how do I actually go about starting? I mean, the practical side of it, the what investments. What do I actually invest in? Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I think the key thing you mentioned there is starting, because we can't get ahead unless we start, right? So, but before I talk about the what, I think I want to just come back a second to what you mentioned about risk, because risk can mean different things. Firstly, there's the risk that you are prepared to take as an investor, and we know that most investors are very, very conservative, whereas there's actually also the risk that you need to take if you're going to achieve those objectives that we talked about. And I know we're going to talk about financial advisors a little bit later. They feature very heavily in this webinar as well, but that's where a financial advisor can really assist in terms of getting you from the risk that you're prepared to take to the risk that you need to take. Because if you haven't saved enough, for example, you may need more growth to achieve that outcome. Cash isn't going to get you there.
I know, I personally that was my problem. I was sitting way too conservatively for my age, and a financial advisor needed to help me. So I completely understand that. Let's get back to the what. So what does my money go into?
Yeah. So if you wanted to invest in cash, I mean, when you make these decisions, you've got to make a call. First of all, once you've committed that you are going to invest, what are you going to buy and how are you going to buy it? So firstly, if you go the cash route, that's pretty easy for me to do myself because I can just go to a bank. And I might not get the best interest rate, but I can at least buy it. But as soon as I start to move up that risk spectrum, then suddenly things get a hell of a lot more difficult. Firstly, if I'm going to buy equities, how do I begin to determine what I'm going to buy? It's not a decision I would be making personally. So I've either got to get a stockbroker to do that on my behalf, or I need a qualified investment professional who's going to do that. So in my view, I would always, go a unit trust approach, which is a way in which you have a portfolio manager who will then decide what to buy. So they're mitigating my risk for me to a certain extent, and they can manage those portfolios in different risk profiles. So I'm able to pick one that's suitable for my needs as well.
So there's something for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
And they are, unit trusts are regulated. We know that they are safe vehicles. They can't just steal my money.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the what I invest in. Now let's talk a little bit to the how, the financial planning benefits of some of the products that we hear about. Obviously we know that there's tax benefits. We know that there's sometimes succession benefits, how I get my money passed on. We could talk quite specifics here. Now I want to sort of step it away and just keep to the basics because every person's life is different, right? Talk to me first. So a lot of us in corporates get to save in a pension fund. I know one of my friends said to me sometimes her pension fund is not going to be enough for her. And I know Paul will talk to that a little bit later around how much is actually enough. So her pension fund might not be enough. What other options does she have to supplement her retirement income, essentially?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think this is where the complexity comes in that puts a lot of people off from getting started, because firstly you've got to investor now. There's all these different products with different names. The jargon can throw people off. completely. But this comes back to that purpose. So unfortunately, in South Africa, only 6% of people are able to maintain any sort of standard of life in retirement, or maintain that quality of life that they had before they retired. So for the majority of us, it is going to be just that. How do I replace that income when I come to retire? So if you are in your friend's position where your employer doesn't have their own pension fund that forces you to save, I mean, you and I are very lucky, you know, we work for 91, we have a provident fund, it's a condition of employment that we have to contribute to that to be employed by 91. But not everybody's that lucky. We're forced to save, other people aren't, so they're on their own. But if they want to invest in a similar product that carries all the same benefits, then that's when things like retirement annuities come in. Has all the same benefits as a pension fund, but it's just a personal pension fund.
And when you say benefits, it's the tax benefit.
That's correct, yeah. So, and there's two levels to that. Firstly, any contribution that you make to that retirement annuity is tax deductible. So that means that every rand that you can invest in there goes a little bit further than you have invested that in a discretionary investment. But then once you've put that money in, it also grows free of tax as well. And that creates a huge advantage from a compounding perspective.
And how much money do I need to start something like that?
It can be small. It varies from provider to provider, but that could be as little as 500 rand a month that gets you into that product.
Do I have to continue to invest that amount? Can I take a break at any point if I maybe don't have enough money that month? Yeah,
it's also a very good question, because that can vary. So the answer is it depends. It depends on the provider that you're using. So there are some providers out there whereby you agree to a certain term up front and you have to keep contributing, and if you renege on that commitment, then there may be penalties involved. But at 91, with our particular product, it's completely voluntary. You're free to start and stop contributions as and when. And for entrepreneurs, this becomes a really, really good product, because their cash flow may be quite lumpy. So they're not necessarily receiving the same salary or income every single month. So that leaves them free to make their own decisions about whether they contribute via a debit order on a monthly basis, or just as and when they feel they are able to.
And then another thing, and I think the panel before also mentioned it, when do I convert to a living annuity? Another kind of term that's thrown around, retirement annuity, living annuity. Kind of just talk to us a bit about the difference in the conversion.
Yeah, the beauty about a retirement annuity is there's no maximum age. So when I leave the employment of 91, I can't be a member of their provident fund anymore, so I'll be forced to make a decision at that time. But with a retirement annuity, there's no maximum age. So I can retire from that any time over the age of 55, but I could wait till I was 90 if I wanted to. And then I can just allow those benefits to, keep on building even longer.
Luckily, we've got a little bit more time than a few years till you retire. I think let's shift on to the next product that we hear a lot about, and it's one that I feel we probably underutilize, is that of a tax-free savings account, or termed TFSA a lot of the time. I think if you've got enough money, everyone should have one of these. I opened one for my daughter, who's 18 months old, and we get a lot of questions around how can I save for my grandchildren in a tax-free way for myself? And I think that's a great example. So Marc, just talk to us about the specifics of a TFSA, or a tax-free savings account.
Yeah, well, the tax-free element of it is really an incentive that's being provided by government to encourage people to save, and I think it's following on from many other jurisdictions that have similar products in place, and they've been really successful at achieving that goal as well. But as it stands today, you're allowed to contribute up to 36,000 Rand per year into a tax-free savings account, subject to a lifetime limit of 500,000 Rand.
And all the growth on that is tax-free?
Completely free of tax, whether you own cash or whether you own equities or bonds within that. The growth is completely free of tax.
And when can I start? I mean, I've started for my daughter. She hopefully will, continue it if I don't have enough to continue my contributions to her. Who can you open it for, and how long does it take to sort of reach that cap?
Yeah, we see this use case quite a lot, and especially for grandparents wanting to contribute on behalf of grandchildren, or parents contributing on behalf of children. So for both of those, it's quite nice because you have an opportunity to donate up to 100,000 Rand per year without paying any donations tax. So for wealthy individuals, or any individual actually, it's a great way of taking income out of your hands and putting it into theirs instead. But there does become a bit of a debate about utilising this 500,000 Rand limit. And if you contribute on behalf of your daughter, you are eating into that 500,000 Rand that she's allowed to use in her lifetime. But I would argue you're gifting her, something much more significant than that. So I've got a daughter that just turned 17 recently. Tax-free savings accounts weren't available when she was born. But if I'd started contributing at that time, I would have reached her maximum contribution amount just before she turned 14, based on current rules as they are today. And then from there, you could just leave that amount to grow. But if she waited until she started working, and let's assume that she has disposable income at the age of 21 where she can start making those contributions herself, by the time she reached her lifetime limits, that value that she'd contributed would have grown to about 900,000 Rand if you assume 8% growth. But if we'd gone the other route and I started contributing from her birth, that would be 4.5 million Rand that she would have.
Wow.
So that, again, it's that power of compounding.
So my daughter's lucky, hopefully.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
All right, let's shift on to, I've now done a retirement annuity, I've done a tax-free savings, I might have a little bit of money left over at the end of the month. What do I do with it? We often get the question of, should I invest or should I pay off my debt? What's your opinion there?
Yeah, I'm a person who doesn't like debt, so it does generally depend on personal preference. I think, given interest rates are pretty high at the moment, the interest becomes quite prohibitive for a lot of people. So, and if you want to look at it in the context of almost a guaranteed return, if you're paying 10% interest on your bond at the moment, that's a pretty high guaranteed return that you can get, and that's also a tax-free return as well. But on the flip side, if you are making excess contributions into your bond every month and that sits within an access bond, that can become tempting for some people to dip into it if suddenly there's a holiday further down the line, that they'd like. And it's very easily accessible, and you can move money from that to your bank account very, very easily. Whereas I do think there is something to be said for establishing that discipline of, contributing to something where you're accumulating savings. And the fact that it's more difficult to get your hands on them, it becomes a bigger barrier.
Yeah, to just spending.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's do another scenario. Whereas I've don't have any debt and I've got a little bit of extra money. I've done my RA, my tax-free savings account. What else should I invest in?
Yeah, that's again coming back to purpose. So I would then look at, as a first port of call, establishing some kind of emergency fund that I can put money away in. I also want to make sure I'm taking advantage of other tax exemptions or benefits that are available to me. So whilst cash generally gets added to my income, that gets taxed every year and gets taxed at my marginal rate, the first 23,800 Rand that I earn as someone below the age of 65 is completely free of tax. So it makes sense to utilise that and keep that locked away. So if, heaven forbid, anything were to happen to me, I've got those emergency funds.
You don't have to dip into anything else, yeah.
Exactly. Then once I start to move beyond that, then I'm moving into the realms of, tax planning. So I want something that can maybe, it's not tax-free because I've maximised that, but something that maybe provides a bit of a tax arbitrage opportunity versus it being held in my own hands. So then I might start to look at things like policy wrappers. And by that, I mean things like sinking funds and endowments. So they're life company products. And the life company is essentially the owner of the investment, and I am then a policy holder. But what it means is the life company has its own tax rate that is applied, which is typically lower than that of the people who invest there.
Okay, adding more jargon, so we'll probably have to unpack those ones at a different point. I know that we've probably not got enough time for today. You've painted quite a rosy picture with these different products and their tax benefits, the succession we haven't gone into as much yet. What are the negatives? What are the costs associated with some of these products?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a negative, but there are generally 3 pillars of cost. So we talked about the what at the start. So once you've decided which unit trust funds you're going to invest in, it's a professional service. The portfolio managers charge a fee for that. So that's your first pillar. But essentially, you just want to make sure you're getting value for money and that your portfolio manager is delivering on the objectives of that particular fund. Then you have a platform fee, which will typically be used to administer that investment once it's been established. But platforms have reached the scale here in South Africa now where they are able to leverage that scale with asset management businesses. So the cost of buying those funds via the platform will typically be lower than it would be if you were to access that fund directly. But you do need to load the platform fee on top of that, which means it probably sort of evens out. And then there's the advice fee, and that does vary from one advisor to another. But again, it's about the value that's being added, and there's been several studies that have been issued globally where the value of that advice can be put at anywhere between 1.5% per annum, and some I've seen as high as 4% per annum.
I mean, that was my final question around financial advice. We often get questions around how to pick a financial advisor. I mean, I said at the beginning, I've recently hired one because they always say, the mechanic's car is always broken, or the doctor's kids are always sick, and I really felt like that. My finances were in a mess. I could do the investment part, but I wasn't very good at the financial structuring, the financial planning part. So I hired a financial advisor. Talk to us a little bit about what's the typical cost for a financial advisor, number one, and then how do I know that I've chosen a good financial advisor?
Okay. If I can just add to the point I was making previously as well. So you might assume that 1.5% to 4% comes from picking the best funds. It typically doesn't. It comes from behavioral management. So stopping you from, staying as cautiously invested as you actually were. Yeah, exactly. So advice fees can vary, anywhere between a sort of 0.25% and 1% on an ongoing basis. In terms of knowing whether an advisor is good, I think the industry has become very professionalized. So these are people who are typically highly qualified, and the industry is regulated as well. So
yeah, I mean, for me, I always say to people, you don't have to meet just with one financial advisor. Meet with one or two, find someone who clicks with you. Like you say, they are regulated professionals, but this is a relationship for a long period of time. So you want to make sure if you are thinking about signing up to a financial advisor that it's going to be a long journey, so you're picking the right one.
Yeah, correct.
Marc, that wraps up our session today. A big thank you to you for making sense of the jargon and giving us so many valuable insights. We hope that this has helped demystify some of those key product decisions and has left you feeling a little bit more empowered to make the choices that support a future with no regrets. More great content to come now, so stick around.